in chapter 38 and 39, it's focused on Gog and Magog. And Gog is a picture of Satan, and Magog, the nations. We read of Gog and Magog in Revelation 20. Once Satan is loose from the bottomless pit, and Gog and Magog comes against the camp of the saints. So it's Satan and his forces coming against the corporate church. And in Ezekiel 38, God tells us of Gog and Magog's end, and this would be not during the Great Tribulation, but the completion of the Great Tribulation. It says in verse 20, so that the fishes of the sea, and the fowls of the heaven, and the beasts of the field, and all creeping things that creep upon the earth, and all the men that are upon the face of the earth, shall shake at my presence, and the mountains shall be thrown down, and the steep places shall fall, and every wall shall fall to the ground, and I will call for a sword against him throughout all my mountains, saith the Lord Jehovah. Every man's sword shall be against his brother, and I will plead against him with pestilence and with blood, and I will rain upon him and upon his bands and upon the many people that are with him, an overflowing rain and great hailstones, fire and brimstone. I just wanted to read verse 22 so we see the context is fire and brimstone, judgment day. But verse 21, speaking of Gog and Magog, saith the Lord Jehovah, every man's sword shall be against his brother. And that is referring to the army of Satan, the forces of Satan. Or turn to Zechariah chapter 14. In Zechariah 14, again, the context can be established. It begins with the Great Tribulation, moves into Judgment Day. Look at the last part of verse 5. And Jehovah my God shall come, and all the saints with thee. So Christ comes with 10,000s of his saints. Then, a little further on, we read in verse 12, and this shall be the plague wherewith Jehovah will smite all the people that have fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall consume away while they stand upon their feet, and their eyes shall consume away in their holes, and their tongue shall consume away in their mouth. And shall come to pass in that day that a great tumult from Jehovah shall be among them, and they shall lay hold everyone on the hand of his neighbor, and his hand shall rise up against the hand of his neighbor. It says the same thing as Ezekiel, that everyone will basically fight one another. They're going to fight one another. They're going to lay hold on the hand of their neighbor. And the third place where the context is Judgment Day is 2 Chronicles chapter 20. Now, how do we know 2 Chronicles 20 has the context of Judgment Day? Anyone? Because of the book of Joel. The book of Joel. And I'll actually read that first before we go here. In Joel 3, it says in verse 12, let the heathen or the nations be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen, the nations round about. Put ye in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Come, get you down, for the press is full. The fats overflow, for their wickedness is great. Multitudes, multitudes in the valley of decision, for the day of Jehovah is near. In the valley of decision, the sun and the moon shall be darkened, and the stars shall withdraw their shining. And I wanted to read that because that links it to Matthew 24, verse 29, immediately after the tribulation. And so in the valley of Jehoshaphat, God says, there will I sit to judge all the heathen. 2 Chronicles 20 is that valley of Jehoshaphat that Joel 3 is referring to. They have these enemy armies. It's Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir that are approaching Judah and Jerusalem, and King Jehoshaphat, who's the king at that time. And Jehoshaphat, strangely, because from what we can read in the Bible, had an army over 1 million men. So they seemed to be able to take care of themselves, but Jehoshaphat sought the Lord, and it seemed with the language, we have no might to fight against these people that are coming against us. And I think it's just basically that language is there to indicate the great multitude, where there are many of Judah, many of Jerusalem spiritually, but we can't really do battle. We're scattered across the earth. But anyway, they pray to the Lord, and then the Lord sends a prophet who says, don't worry, you have no need to fight in this battle. And that's why we want to stay out of it. We don't want to choose a side. Yes, there are issues, very obvious, and as we're sharing the Bible, we'll touch upon, if someone is interested, that abortion is murder, or marriage is between a man and a woman, or whatever. We're not going to shy away from that, but we don't want to get bogged down in any issue, single issue, or in any side of the battle, because it's not ours. God will fight in the battle, and the way He fights, it's incredible, is through the enemy army. He's going to cause them to fight themselves. And here we read in 2 Chronicles 20, verse 21, and when he had consulted with the people, he appointed singers unto Jehovah, and that should praise the beauty of holiness as they went out before the army, and to say, praise Jehovah, for his mercy endureth forever. And when they began to sing and to praise, Jehovah set ambushments against the children of Ammon, Moab, and Mount Seir, which were come against Judah. And they were smitten, for the children of Ammon and Moab stood up against the inhabitants of Mount Seir, utterly to slay and destroy them. And when they had made an end of the inhabitants of Seir, everyone helped to destroy another. So you can understand, to begin with, why Ammon and Moab would join forces, because they were children of Lot, and they fought against Mount Seir. And so that's what we shouldn't be surprised when we see groups that naturally tend to side with one another. But what's interesting is, after they destroyed Mount Seir, they couldn't stop. And they start fighting each other until they were all dead, 100%. Not a single one left alive, historically. That's incredible, that there could be a battle that resulted in 100% fatalities. But that's what God is saying, because, of course, that's going to be the case with the final battle of Judgment Day. There won't be one unsaved that escapes. Every single one will be destroyed. But how God is picturing it, and there are groups like the those identify with homosexuality or lesbian and feminist groups, and they've joined, but they're fracturing, because now, with other issues with gender, some of the feminist groups are now siding against some of these other groups. And you can't make any alliance that will last during Judgment Day. Eventually, it's going to come to the point where there will be division, that there will be infighting and a battle. Of course, we're not seeing people, in most cases, literally physically kill one another, but keep in mind, it's a spiritual judgment. The judgment on the churches was a spiritual judgment. God shamed the churches for 23 years. He brought spiritual judgment upon them, and yet He didn't necessarily have them physically killed. It was something done in the spiritual realm. And the amazing thing is that now we're able to recognize, and this has never been understood or recognized, as far as I know, in past history, I don't think you can find a theologian anywhere or a commentary on the Bible, and I've read them on these verses where they're fighting one another, that would say, well, that is because Satan's kingdom is divided in the day of judgment and falls. And that's why this is a new understanding that the Lord is giving us as we've entered into this period. And we're the only ones that are equipped to see it and to grab a hold of it based on all the information that's come before. It would have been impossible to see. And so that gives us a glimpse into our daily newspaper. When at least it's been fascinating to me hearing these reports, and they might get you down normally, typically, and they still might get you down, even having understanding, but now there's something added. And when we see this and this terrible thing, no peace to the wicked. There's constant division, and it's daily being reported. Then we can have understanding and knowledge of what's happening, and it really is a sort of comfort. It just gives us a comfort that things are not really as chaotic as they seem, but God is working as judge, as divider over them, and He's dividing the enemy, which proves that they have been destroyed, that they have been defeated. Here in 2 Chronicles, we saw in the last verse, they were dead bodies fallen to the earth, and none escaped. Does that sound familiar? That none escaped? How about if we turn to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5? 1 Thessalonians 5. We're going to see a lot of tie-ins with verses that maybe we've been familiar with. In 1 Thessalonians 5, starting in verse 2, "For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night." So again, what's the context? Judgment day. And not only that, but spiritual judgment, because Christ comes as a thief, and He's such an incredible thief, since it's done spiritually, the world's totally unaware, just as He judged the church, and they would deny it to this day. So He comes as a thief in the night, "For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them, as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. But ye, brethren, are not in darkness, that that day should overtake you as a thief." They will not escape. None escaped of those invading armies. In 2 Chronicles 20, they were all dead men. And we could also go to Jeremiah 50, and this would tie in Babylon and its fall. In Jeremiah 50, verses 28 and 29, it says, "The voice of them that flee and escape out of the land of Babylon." And none escape except, of course, God's elect. God's elect. That were not part of the enemy army. None of the enemy escapes, but God's elect escape. And it's the voice of them that flee and escape out of the land of Babylon, to declare in Zion the vengeance of Jehovah our God, the vengeance of His temple. And that's what we're doing. We're saying Satan and Babylon, his kingdom, were instrumental in the destruction of the church, the temple. And now it's God's vengeance upon them for their destroying, for daring to raise up their hand against God's holy people. "Call together the archers against Babylon, all ye that bend the bow, camp against it round about, let none thereof escape. Recompense her according to her work, according to all that she has done, do unto her, for she has been proud against Jehovah, against the Holy One of Israel." And that statement what she has done, do unto her, ties into Revelation 18 and the fall of Babylon there. So none of Babylon escapes, but the ones that are voicing this are those that have escaped. And that would fit with Luke 21. If we go over to Luke 21, verse 34, and take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life, and so that day come upon you unawares. And the word unawares is the word translated sudden in 1 Thessalonians 5. Sudden destruction. Unawares destruction. I think it's the only two places it's found, but check me on that. And so that means you can use it either way. You could say, so that they come upon you suddenly here, or transfer this to 1 Thessalonians 5, sudden or unawares destruction, which is a good way, a vivid way of describing the spiritual judgment, because you can't see it. So especially those that are dead in spirit, they have no possibility of seeing it, and so it takes them unawares. And then verse 35, for as a snare shall come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. Watch ye therefore and pray always that ye may be accounted worthy to escape all these things that shall come to pass, and to stand before the Son of Man. And that, you can go a lot of different ways with that verse, because we're all appearing before the judgment seat or standing before the judgment seat. None of the wicked will stand. They're part of Satan's house, his kingdom. They will fall. But the elect will stand, and the elect will escape all these things by God's mercy, according to his grace upon his people. Now let's go back to Jeremiah 50, where we just were. Jeremiah 50.